The day I found out I was pregnant, I overheard my boyfriend's twin brother say, "Bro, I've been pretending to be you and messing with your girlfriend for so long. What if she finds out?" Jake, my boyfriend, just laughed and replied, "She won't leave. It's not the first time we've switched." That afternoon, I booked a medical consultation and a one-way plane ticket, scheduled for the same day as our wedding. If they plan to humiliate me in front of everyone, why shouldn't I escape first and turn their game into a joke? With 5 days left, I could now tell the twins apart easily. Jake was cold, distant, always serious. Ethan, the twin, was playful and had a small mole on his stomach. Jake never let me close enough to know if he had one too. The next morning, Jake was in the living room, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and reading the newspaper. Dressed nicely. "We're having guests today," he said without looking up. Later, Ethan arrived with a woman named Olivia. I played my part, pretending to be surprised when Jake introduced us. "This is my twin brother. He's just returned from overseas." Ethan shook my hand. "Nice to meet you." His expression was calm, his smile polite. But I knew too much to be fooled anymore. Olivia chimed in, pulling me close. "Rachel and I were roommates in college. And guess what? I'm going to be your bridesmaid." Before I could respond, the chef called us for lunch. At the table, Olivia sat between the twins and smiled at me. "Rachel, has Jake been acting different lately?" I knew she wanted me to embarrass myself. So I smiled gently and said, "Yes, he's changed. He's become much kinder to me. I think I've fallen for him even more." The room fell silent. Both brothers stiffened. Jake shot Ethan a cold glare. Then, trying to keep the mood light, Ethan placed shrimp in my bowl. "Sweetie, your favorite, garlic shrimp, no shells." He froze as he realized what he'd just said. "My brother calls you that all the time." "It just slipped out," he added quickly. I nodded. "That's thoughtful." Jake's jaw clenched. I quietly ate the shrimp and stood up. Moments later, I was in the bathroom, holding back nausea. When I returned, Olivia gave me a knowing look. "Morning sickness, maybe?" I replied, "No. Just an upset stomach." Later that night, Jake and Ethan left to take Olivia home. They came back late. I wasn't sure which twin had returned. I saw his phone on the nightstand and checked the messages. It was all there. "Jake, you're switching back with me in a few days." "Ethan, no way. I'm not done having fun." "Jake, you've been treating her well. Don't tell me you've caught feelings." "Ethan, of course not. You said the nicer I am, the harder she'll fall before we crush her." "Jake, just don't touch her. That's the rule." So tonight, it was Ethan in the room with me. 10 minutes later, he came out of the shower and casually sat beside me. "You've got those long nails again." "My back still has marks." I replied without looking up. "Call the police then." He chuckled, "Why are you so cute?" and leaned in to kiss me. I stopped him. "My stomach hurts." He frowned. "Again?" I nodded. He offered to massage it, but I pushed his hand away. "I'm fine." Later that night, the pain got worse. I curled up in bed, eyes shut tight. Ethan eventually pulled me into his arms, gently patting my back. "Sweetie, don't hurt anymore." His voice was soft. And for a moment, I thought I felt something real. But the next morning reminded me who he really was. I woke to find him standing over me, holding my phone. His expression was unreadable. "Why is the hospital sending you pre-procedure instructions?" My heart skipped. But I stayed calm. "Probably just some pop-up ad. If I were really pregnant, I'd tell you." He narrowed his eyes. "You've been visiting those kinds of websites?" "Learning is good," I said flatly. He grinned. "Aren't the things I teach you enough?" Then he whispered, "In 4 days, we'll be married. I'll make you the happiest bride in the world." I smiled. Because in 4 days, I would be on a plane. And they would both be standing alone at a wedding I'd never show up to. There would be no marriage. No future. Not for any of us. The day after the dinner, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when I needed to, laughed when expected, and played the role of a devoted fiancé. But inside, I was counting the hours. 4 more days until the wedding. 4 more days until I disappeared from their lives forever. That morning, Ethan brought me breakfast in bed. He sat beside me, carefully placing a tray with toast, orange juice, and scrambled eggs on my lap. "Sweetie, you need to eat well," he said softly. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Thank you." He watched me as I ate, his expression unreadable. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, trying to figure out if I believed the lie he told last night. He had not dropped the abortion message. I could feel it lingering between us like smoke after a fire. Later, Jake called. He never did that before noon. His tone was flat. "I heard Ethan made you breakfast." That was new. I replied casually, "Yes, he did. It was nice of him." There was silence on the line, and then he said, "I'll be back tonight. We need to finalize some wedding details." I agreed, "Sure. Looking forward to it." When evening came, the real Jake arrived, cold as ever. He walked past me without a glance and went straight to his office. I followed him quietly and knocked. "Come in," he said. I stepped inside. Jake sat behind his desk, flipping through some documents. Without looking up, he said, "I need your signature on these contracts. It's for the wedding venue and catering." I approached and picked up the pen. As I was about to sign, he suddenly looked up at me. His eyes were sharp. "Tell me something, Rachel. Do you love me?" His question caught me off guard. I stared at him for a moment before answering. "I do. But I'm not sure if I love you. Or your brother." His expression cracked for just a second before he masked it again. "That's a dangerous thing to say," he muttered. I shrugged. "Then maybe you should have thought twice before sharing me with someone else." Jake stood up. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between us. His voice was low and dangerous. "You think you're smart. But don't forget, Rachel, I've always been one step ahead." I tilted my head. "Then why do I feel like I'm the one with all the control now?" He stared at me for a long time, then turned away. "Leave." I walked out calmly, my heart beating fast. I had just poked the bear, but I didn't care anymore. That night, I booked a hotel room near the airport under a different name. I transferred my savings into a new account and contacted a clinic overseas to confirm my appointment. Everything was set. 3 days to go. At home, I continued pretending. Ethan tried to be sweet, cooking dinner and watching movies with me. I played along. I let him think everything was fine. But then he found the suitcase. It was tucked under the bed, half packed. I came out of the shower to find Ethan holding one of my dresses. "Going somewhere?" he asked. I froze for a second, then laughed. "Just a backup suitcase in case the honeymoon is sudden." His eyes narrowed. "You never prepare in advance." I smiled. "People change." He nodded slowly. "Yes, they do." The next day, Rachel, Olivia, and I went for the final wedding dress fitting. Olivia talked the whole ride about the flowers, the venue, the vows. I pretended to care, but my mind was elsewhere. While Olivia admired her reflection in the mirror, she turned to me and said, "You know, I always thought Jake would end up with someone stronger. Someone who could match his ambition." I replied calmly, "Maybe strength is quiet." She laughed. "Or maybe it's just weakness in disguise." I smiled at her through the mirror. "We'll find out soon enough, won't we?" That night, I stayed up staring at the ceiling. 2 more days. My stomach was aching again. The stress, the lies, the weight of the secret inside me, it all pressed on me like a storm cloud about to burst. At dawn, I texted a cab company to confirm my early morning pickup for the day of the wedding. I wasn't going to let them write my ending. I would vanish before their eyes. Let them stand at the altar and realize they had lost the only woman who ever saw them clearly. Because I was done playing the fool in their twisted game. And soon, the whole world would know just how cruel Jake and Ethan really were. The morning before the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, brushing my hair in silence. My reflection looked calm, even serene, but inside I was crumbling. I had packed everything. Passport, new phone, cash, documents. The plane ticket was confirmed. The procedure scheduled. Everything ready. I went downstairs to find Rachel humming in the kitchen. She was preparing breakfast like it was any other day. Olivia had stayed over again. She came down the stairs wearing Jake's shirt. Her presence had become constant, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. She smiled at me. "Good morning, bride-to-be." I returned the smile with one of my own. "Good morning." Jake entered a few minutes later, dressed immaculately, already on a call. He didn't even glance at me. I wondered which one he was today. Jake or Ethan. But I already knew. The way he ignored me? That was classic Jake. He hung up and turned to Olivia, brushing a kiss on her cheek before walking to the table. I caught that. And so did Rachel. Her eyes widened for a moment, but she said nothing. I sat down and sipped my tea in silence. We spent the morning going through last-minute details. Ethan, the real Ethan, arrived with a small gift. A necklace. He placed it in my hand and said, "For luck." I opened the box. It was a silver pendant, simple and elegant. Ethan leaned in close. I picked it out myself. Something to remember me by. I met his gaze. "I will remember everything, Ethan." His smile faltered. That afternoon, Jake insisted on us taking pre-wedding photos. I didn't argue. Let them have their perfect memories. I posed in a white dress, stood by Jake's side as the photographer snapped picture after picture. Jake kept his hand firmly on my waist. His grip was tight, possessive. For the camera, he smiled. But when no one was looking, he whispered in my ear, "Don't embarrass me tomorrow." I tilted my head and whispered back. You'll be the one embarrassed. He stiffened. Later that evening, Rachel handed me a small envelope. Your mother left this with me last year. She wanted you to have it before your wedding day. I opened it alone in my room. Inside was a simple note. My sweet girl, never mistake silence for weakness. When it's time, speak. When you do, make sure it's loud enough to be heard forever. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my bag. I would carry her words with me wherever I went. That night, Ethan knocked on my door. I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. He walked in quietly, sat on the edge of the bed, and touched my arm. Rachel, are you nervous? I turned to face him slowly. A little. He looked down. You'll be gone soon. I didn't respond. He continued. I mean, as in married, your whole life will change. Yes, it will, I said softly. He reached for my hand, his voice low. Do you ever wish things had been different? I stared at him. Do you? Ethan's eyes searched mine, then he stood up. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. He left quietly. When I was sure the house was asleep, I dressed in black, grabbed my bag, and crept down the stairs. My heart was pounding. Every step felt like thunder on the hardwood floor. At the door, I paused. One last look around. Then I opened it slowly and slipped outside into the darkness. The cab was waiting at the corner. I ran to it, got inside, and gave the driver the airport address. As the car pulled away, I looked back once. The house grew smaller in the distance. My prison. My stage. My battlefield. At the airport, I kept my head low. I moved through security like a ghost. When I reached the gate, I turned off my old phone and dropped it in a trash can. I sat by the window and waited. But 20 minutes before boarding, I heard it. Rachel. I turned slowly. Jake stood there, out of breath, eyes wild. Behind him, Ethan appeared, calmer, but no less intense. You're not going anywhere, Jake said. I stood up. Yes, I am. Ethan stepped forward. You can't do this. Not after everything. Everything? I laughed. You mean the lies? The betrayal? Jake moved closer. If you get on that plane, I swear. I cut him off. What? You'll replace me? Again? Jake froze. I turned to the gate. The announcement had started. Final boarding. Ethan reached for me. Rachel, please. Don't go. I looked him in the eyes. You were the kindest monster I ever met. That's all you'll ever be. Then I walked away. And I didn't look back. The plane took off just after sunrise, slicing through the clouds like a blade. I sat in my window seat, clutching the armrest, trying to steady my breath. My chest was tight, not from fear of flying, but from everything I had left behind. The past year. The lies. The manipulation. The two brothers who treated me like a game piece. Now, for the first time in a long while, I had no mask to wear. No role to play. I was just me. 2 hours into the flight, a stewardess stopped beside me. Miss, are you all right? I nodded. Just tired. She smiled and moved on. I rested my hand over my stomach. The pain had eased. I had decided to keep the appointment, but I had not yet made a decision. Not really. The clinic was in a quiet town across the country. No one would think to look for me there. I used a false name and checked into a small guest house with peeling wallpaper and soft white sheets. The air smelled of lavender and rain. The woman at the front desk asked no questions. She handed me the key and said, You have a kind face. You look like someone running from something. I paused. Maybe I am. That night, I sat on the porch watching the storm roll in. I held my phone, my new phone, clean of any contacts, and debated messaging Rachel. But what would I say? Instead, I opened the voice recorder and spoke quietly. If anything happens to me, I want someone to know the truth. My name is Rachel Lynn. I was engaged to a man named Jake, and his twin brother Ethan pretended to be him for months. They both used me. Lied to me. I'm pregnant, and I don't even know who the father is. But I'm done being their puppet. I saved the recording and emailed it to myself. The next morning, I walked into the clinic. The nurse at the desk greeted me kindly. She took me to a room and gave me a gown. I changed slowly, staring at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. I looked pale, but steady. Tired, but alive. The doctor arrived and smiled gently. Are you sure you want to do this? I hesitated. Then I whispered, Can I hear the heartbeat first? He nodded. A few minutes later, the room filled with the soft, steady rhythm of life. My eyes flooded with tears. I covered my mouth and turned away. That's enough. I need time. The doctor nodded again. Take all the time you need. I walked out without finishing the procedure. Back at the guest house, I curled up on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. I didn't know what my future would look like, but I knew it wouldn't involve Jake or Ethan. I wasn't going back. The next day, I visited a small legal office in town. I asked to change my name. I picked something simple, something clean. From now on, I would be Rachel May. The lawyer asked if I needed protection, a restraining order, police involvement. I said no. I didn't want revenge. I wanted silence, freedom. But freedom, as it turned out, didn't last long. 2 weeks after I disappeared, a letter arrived at the guest house. No return address. Inside was a photo, me, taken through a window, sitting alone with my tea. And a note written in sharp, aggressive strokes. You really thought you could leave without consequences? I stood there frozen, heart pounding. I asked the owner of the guest house if anyone had come by. She shook her head. No one strange. No one asked for you. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I checked out early and took a bus to another town. I changed hotels. I used cash only. I started wearing sunglasses and a hat. I lived like a shadow. But whoever sent that letter, they had found me once. They could do it again. I didn't know if it was Jake or Ethan. And that was the worst part. Because I didn't know which one I feared more. The third town I moved to was quieter, coastal. The kind of place where the streets rolled down toward the sea and the night smelled like salt and jasmine. I rented a small studio apartment above a bakery. The owner was an older woman named Marla, who let me pay weekly in cash and asked no questions. Here, I became Rachel May, a freelance editor working remotely. I created a new email, a new bank account, a new life. I woke up early to walk by the shore, made toast with jam from the bakery below, and tried to pretend I wasn't afraid every time the phone buzzed or a knock sounded at the door. The fear was constant. But so was the life growing inside me. One morning, I sat at a tiny cafe near the boardwalk. I had begun writing in a small leather notebook. Not a diary, exactly. More like pieces of myself. Memories I didn't want to lose. One entry simply read, "He never touched me, but I still feel like my body doesn't belong to me." Another said, "Ethan once told me I looked prettiest when I was quiet. I hope my daughter roars." I didn't know if it was a girl. But it helped to imagine something beautiful on the other side of this storm. That afternoon, as I returned to my apartment, I noticed a black car parked across the street. It wasn't there that morning. The windows were tinted. The engine was off. I kept walking, heart pounding, fingers tightening around the paper bag in my hand. I didn't look back. Upstairs, I sat in the dark with the curtains drawn. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I waited. At midnight, the car was gone. But the next morning, a note was taped to my door. "You can run. But you'll always be mine." No name. No handwriting I recognized. Just the words, sharp and final. I packed in silence. Took only what I needed. I went to the bus terminal and bought a ticket to a city I had never visited before. I used a fake name again. Switched phones again. I didn't cry. Not even once. In the new city, I stayed in a hostel. I shared a room with 2 travelers who spoke only broken English. They were kind. Offered me crackers and orange juice. One of them, a girl from Finland, braided my hair as we sat watching a storm roll in. She didn't ask my name. I didn't offer it. That night, I checked the news. Just out of habit. I typed in Jake's full name. What I saw made my breath catch. Local entrepreneur calls off wedding after bride vanishes. There was a photo of Jake at the altar, jaw tight, eyes cold. The article said I had suffered a mental breakdown, disappeared without a word, and that the family was concerned for my safety. Concerned. That was rich. Jake had told the press that he forgave me and only hoped I was receiving the help I needed. Ethan wasn't mentioned once. That was no accident. They were rewriting the narrative, turning me into a fragile woman who ran from happiness. And maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe they believed it too. I stared at the screen. Then I laughed. Out loud. In a room full of strangers. Because the truth was so far from that headline, it could have been fiction. That week, I contacted a therapist through a charity network. I told her bits and pieces. She said I had symptoms of trauma, possibly PTSD. She asked if I felt safe. I didn't answer. She asked if I wanted to report anything. I didn't. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about survival. I wanted to live. I wanted to grow this baby in peace. I wanted to stop waking up afraid. But when I closed my eyes that night, I saw Ethan again. Standing in the hallway. Hand on my wrist. Whispering my name like a question and a promise. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't sure I feared him because he lied to me. I feared him because some part of me still wanted to believe the lies. Weeks passed. The hostel turned into a short-term rental, and then into a tiny apartment near a park filled with mothers and strollers. I started volunteering part-time at a local library, shelving books and helping children read during quiet weekday mornings. No one knew who I was. No one asked. It was the safest I had felt in months. I told people I had just moved from another state, that I was pregnant by choice, that I worked online in copywriting. The lies came easier now. I wore them like armor. One evening, while closing the library, I found a little girl crying in the corner. She had gotten separated from her mother. I knelt beside her, wiping her tears, and told her everything would be okay. As I handed her back to her mother 15 minutes later, the woman looked at me with a strange expression. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," she said. That night, I cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was scared, but because for once, someone saw something in me that wasn't broken. At my next appointment, the doctor smiled and said, "It's a girl. Do you want to hear the heartbeat?" I nodded. And there it was, steady and strong, like the rhythm of a new beginning. I decided to name her Lila. Lila May. A name with no history. No pain. Just light. But peace doesn't last when you're being hunted by the past. A few days later, I received a package at the apartment. No return address. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. Inside was a single ultrasound photo. It wasn't mine. It had the name Rachel Lynn printed at the bottom. And a sticky note that said, "Are you still sure it's yours?" My hands shook. I sat on the floor, trying to breathe. It meant someone had access to my records. Or worse, they had faked one to mess with me. Either way, it was a threat. I went to the clinic the next morning and showed the doctor. She confirmed it wasn't from their office. "Someone's trying to scare you," she said. "Do you have a safe place to stay?" I nodded. But I was lying. There was no safe place. Not when you've been dragged into the games of men who think everything is theirs, including you. That night, I double-locked the doors. I checked the windows. I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. I kept my phone on silent but within reach. And I stayed like that for a week. Barely sleeping. Barely functioning. Until one morning, the apartment buzzer rang. I didn't answer. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, a voice came through the intercom. "Rachel. It's me." It was Ethan. My whole body froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He kept talking. "Rachel, I know you're in there, please. I just want to talk. I've been looking everywhere for you. I'm not here to hurt you." I stepped away from the intercom. My vision blurred. I ran to the back of the apartment, grabbed my bag, and climbed down the fire escape. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the metal railing. I didn't stop until I reached the bus stop 3 blocks away. I got on the first bus that came, didn't care where it was headed. I sat in the back, cradling my stomach. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I did whisper to myself, over and over. "He found me. He found me." And worse, he sounded like he meant it when he said he wasn't going to hurt me. Because monsters don't always come roaring. Sometimes they come whispering your name like they never betrayed you. Like they still belong in your life. I changed towns again. This time I didn't wait for the fear to grow roots. I bought a cheap wig, dyed my eyebrows, wore oversized glasses, and moved into a room above a closed-down bookstore. The windows barely opened, and the heater clanked at night, but it was quiet. No name on the mailbox. No online presence. No forwarding address. I became someone who existed only in passing glances. The town was small. People kept to themselves. I picked up work cleaning an old tailor shop in exchange for meals and tips. The owner, Mr. Drew, was nearly 80 and half blind. He never asked my name. He just called me Kid. One evening, as I was closing the back door, he said, "You look like someone carrying a war inside her." I paused. Maybe I am. He didn't press. He just nodded. "Don't let it win." That night, I sat on the floor and counted every coin I had left. I had enough to last 1 more month. After that, I'd need a real job again. Maybe even reveal my identity. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not while Ethan was still looking for me. Because I knew it was him. Jake would have sent a lawyer or a threat. Ethan came in person. Soft voice. Apologies in his eyes. And that made it worse. He wasn't trying to punish me. He wanted to bring me back. And a part of me hated how familiar his voice still felt. I started writing letters I never sent. To Ethan. To Jake. To the baby. One of them said, "Dear Lila, if you're reading this, it means I tried. I tried to give you a life far away from the people who broke me. You were the only reason I kept running. And if one day you wonder why your father isn't around, I hope you understand, it wasn't just to protect you from him. It was to protect you from what loving someone like that can do to a woman. I burned that letter in the sink the next day. I didn't want to live in fear. But fear had made a home inside me. One afternoon, I went to the market. Just for fruit and bread. The cashier was chatting with someone behind me, laughing. That's when I heard it. The voice. Soft, familiar. American accent, not local. He said, "No, thank you. I'm just looking for someone." My blood went cold. I turned slowly. Ethan. He was on the other side of the street, talking to a florist. I ducked behind a fruit stand, heart racing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. How did he find me? Was he following every bus line, every booking, every shadow? I waited until he turned away. Then I ran. I didn't go back to the bookstore. Didn't go back to my room. I called a shelter 2 towns over, claimed I was fleeing an abusive partner, and used a false name again. They said they had space for 1 week. It would have to be enough. At the shelter, I shared a room with a woman named Talia. She had a bruised eye and a child who barely spoke. She never asked my story, and I didn't ask hers. But one night, as we sat folding laundry, she looked at me and said, "The ones who smile the softest always cut the deepest." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew. I knew what it felt like to be touched gently by someone who could destroy you without raising their voice. That week, I started making a plan. Not to run again. But to end this. To make sure Ethan never found me again. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Lila. And I was done hiding. I left the shelter before dawn. Talia gave me her extra coat and a packed sandwich. She said nothing when I hugged her. Her silence was her blessing. At the train station, I bought a one-way ticket to the capital under a fake name. Not because I planned to stay there, but because that was the last place anyone would expect me to go. Big cities swallow people like me whole. I arrived at night, disappeared into the crowd, and found a room in a rundown boarding house near the edge of downtown. The room had no heat, but the door locked. That was enough. I sat on the bed and opened my notebook again. This time, I didn't write to Lila. I wrote to Ethan. "Ethan, you found me more than once. But you never really saw me. You thought because you were kind sometimes, because you remembered my favorite shrimp, I would forgive you. But being gentle while deceiving someone is not kindness. It is cruelty with a ribbon tied around it." I closed the notebook and looked out the window. I was tired of running. Tired of waiting for him to catch up. So I did something I never thought I would. I called him. From a burner phone, late at night, heart pounding in my throat. He answered on the second ring. "Hello?" His voice was soft. Too soft. I didn't say anything. But I knew he knew it was me. "Rachel," he whispered, "please. I just want to talk." "So talk," I said. There was silence on the line. Then he spoke carefully. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I know. You let me believe I was safe. I was scared. Jake. He made rules. I broke them. I broke them for you." I almost laughed. "For me?" "Yes. I loved you. I still do. You don't love people you lied to for months, Ethan. You don't love someone you help humiliate." He didn't answer. I gave him one last sentence. "If you ever come near me again, I'll go to the police. I'll go to the press. I'll make sure the world knows exactly what you both did." Then I hung up. I tossed the phone into a trash can and walked away without looking back. For the first time, I felt light. But peace is fragile when built on threats. The next morning, I got a message slipped under my door. Just a photo. Me, from behind, at the train station the day before. On the back, one word. Liar. I stared at it for a long time. Then I lit it on fire and watched it burn in the sink. That afternoon, I went to a lawyer. I told him part of the truth. Enough to get started. He helped me file for a protective order. He drafted a legal affidavit. He helped me contact a small investigative journalist who ran a column on coercion, identity fraud, and partner abuse. I gave her everything. My medical records. The chat logs I had recovered. The voice recordings. The wedding photos with 2 different men standing beside me across a span of weeks. She asked me, "Are you sure you want this to go public?" "Yes." "Even if they deny it?" "Let them." "Even if you lose your privacy?" "I've already lost everything else." She nodded. "Then let's do it right." 2 days later, the article went live. The headline was bold. "The woman who was loved by a lie, one bride's story of deception by identical twins." It didn't use my full name. But it used theirs. I stayed up all night refreshing the article. Reading the comments. Some believed me. Some didn't. But the story spread. And suddenly, they couldn't hide anymore. Jake's company issued a statement denying involvement. Ethan vanished from social media. But I knew he saw it. Because the next day, flowers arrived at the boarding house. No name. Just a card. You win. But remember, I never lied when I said I loved you. I left the flowers on the street. Let the wind take them. Because love that disguises itself in silence, in masks, in betrayal, is not love at all. The article changed everything. Not overnight, but slowly, like ink spreading through water. Bloggers picked it up. Podcasts debated it. A small TV station even requested an interview. I said no to all of them. I didn't want fame. I wanted distance. But the truth was out. And the more people knew, the harder it became for Jake and Ethan to twist the story. They stayed silent. Neither of them filed a lawsuit. Neither issued a personal response. It was their way of disappearing without admitting guilt. Cowards. The lawyer said we had a strong case if I wanted to press charges. Fraud, emotional abuse, identity coercion. But I was tired. And I had other things to focus on. Like Lila. I was now 8 months along. She kicked more often, strong, rhythmic, reminding me she was real. That this wasn't just a story of escape. It was a story of becoming. The boarding house owner helped me move into a women's support residence closer to a hospital. There, I met other women with stories like mine. Different faces, different pain. But the same thread of survival ran through us all. One woman, Naomi, had escaped a cult. Another, Tess, had fled a wealthy husband who tracked her every move through smart devices. We sat together in the shared kitchen, drank tea, and spoke in unfinished sentences that somehow made perfect sense. "You're the one from the article," Tess said one night. I didn't deny it. "You were brave," she added. "No," I said. "I was just tired of being afraid." "Bravery is born in tired women," she replied. That night, I wrote Lila another letter. "Dear Lila, when I was your age, I was already afraid of being too loud, too emotional, too much. I let people convince me that my silence made me lovable. I want you to be the opposite of me. I want you to take up space. To shout. To cry when you need to. To say no when it matters. You were born from pain, yes. But you were also born from the decision to end it." A week later, I went into labor. It was early, sudden. One moment I was making tea. The next, I was on the floor, breathless. The residence manager rushed me to the hospital. The pain was sharp, blinding. But I kept whispering her name. Lila, Lila. Lila. Hours passed in a blur. And then, like the breaking of a storm, she arrived. Tiny, red-faced. Screaming like the world had wronged her. I held her against my chest, sobbing, whispering over and over. "You're safe. You're safe now." The nurses were kind. The room was clean. The sun was rising through the window, painting everything gold. I stared at her fingers, her closed eyes, the way her mouth puckered as she breathed. In that moment, it no longer mattered how she came to be. She was mine. And I was hers. No twin, no man, no lie could rewrite that truth. Later that afternoon, as I lay resting, a nurse brought in an envelope. No postage. Just my name, handwritten on the front. Inside was a photo of Lila. Taken from outside the hospital window. And below it, a short message. "She has your eyes. I won't come closer. I just needed to see her once." No signature. But I knew. I stared at the note for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I simply tore it into pieces, flushed it down the toilet, and held my daughter a little tighter. Ethan may have loved me in his own broken way. But love without honesty isn't love at all. It's control. It's obsession. And I wouldn't let it touch her. Not now. Not ever. The morning we left the hospital, the world felt quiet. Not empty. Not tense. Just still. I wrapped Lila in a soft blanket, her tiny hands curling against her chest. The nurse smiled as she helped me buckle her into the carrier. "Congratulations," she said. "You did it." I nodded, but the words hadn't fully sunk in. I had done it. I had survived. Months of hiding, of fear, of pretending I was smaller than I really was, ended here, in the arms of a newborn who had no idea how strong her mother had become. The women at the residence threw a small welcome gathering that night. Cupcakes. Paper lanterns. A lullaby hummed on a secondhand speaker. They passed Lila around gently like she was something sacred. In a way, she was. She was proof that I had not only escaped, but rebuilt. The article was still out there. People still debated what had happened. There were rumors, doubts, supporters, deniers. But I didn't read the comments anymore. I didn't check the search results. I was done living in other people's versions of my life. Instead, I made mine small but full. Morning walks with Lila. Evening tea on the fire escape. A part-time job doing remote editing. Slowly, I saved enough to get us a one-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy. But it was ours. I put a photo of Lila by the window. No pictures of the past. No ghosts allowed. One day, when she's older, I'll tell her everything. Not to make her afraid, but to teach her how to recognize masks before they slip. How to know the difference between a man who wants to protect you and one who wants to possess you. Until then, I'll protect her. With my silence. With my name. With everything I have left. Months passed. Seasons changed. And for the first time in years, no one followed me. No letters arrived. No photos slid under my door. Ethan kept his word. Or maybe he vanished. Either way, the shadows faded. Lila's first birthday came quietly. I baked a small cake. We wore paper crowns. I sang her a song I wrote myself. After she fell asleep that night, I opened my notebook one last time. I wrote, "Dear Rachel Lynn, you didn't run because you were weak. You ran because you were brave enough to know it wasn't love. You ran so that one day, your daughter could grow up free. You gave her something no one ever gave you. A new beginning." I closed the notebook and placed it in a box under my bed. And I never opened it again. Because my story wasn't about Ethan or Jake anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about rebirth. And this time, I was the one writing the ending.